Hi Rupert, thanks for joining me today. As we mentioned, there's a couple of questions we'd like to run through to get some insight and advice from your perspective. The first of which would be, can you please share one piece of career advice you wish someone had given to you when you were starting out in your career?
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be hard to find one, but I think it's firstly important to recognize that, everyone seeks different things at different times in their career, let alone, when you compare yourself against someone else. One person might be amazingly content doing something that the next person sitting next to them detests. And for me, it's about progress, balance, and doing what I'm doing really well. And I think when I reflect on kind of my working life, which is 15, 16 years now, the biggest thing that I kind of wish someone had made clear to me was that it doesn't just have to be a single threaded life. You don't just have to have one job and that's all you do. And I think I've seen the kind of role models that have emerged in my life, and I've looked at them and I've thought, yeah, they're kind of juggling multiple plates in their life professionally, and it really develops people. And so when I've kind of pursued other things, and I'm not just talking about someone working in the corporate world doing a startup on the side, I just mean about, learning different things, reading books in parallel to your working life, pursuing interests, doing extra courses. There's usually capacity for that. And I think if I saw the sort of 18-year-old me again, that's what I'd like to make really clear, is that one has lots more capacity, especially now that I've got a family. I realize I've got much less capacity. I kind of look back and think to myself, all those years I could have potentially learned so much more. And it's really about learning and progress.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I had somebody else contribute on one of these that said, just say yes and get involved, get doing things, and ultimately that'll give you the challenges and the opportunities that you need from there. So certainly I think, there's definitely good advice in that. And like you said, at the time, probably wanes a little as the family and other parts factor into people's careers. It's definitely good for people that are starting out to heed that, I would say.
Sometimes they come with a bit of a risk, right? Or it feels like a risk.
Yeah.
I'm an inherently low risk person, I've always thought. And so I have to sort of remind myself, especially in your working life, it's not a bad time to take a bit of a risk. You might not want to take a personal risk, but in your professional life, as you kind of develop them over the years, there's, it's a long old journey. It's not just one and done in lots of professions anyway. It's not, you're always learning, you're always needing to decide what to do next and looking for what's coming on the horizon. And that requires the odd risk, take a punt on something a bit different.
Can you please share a pivotal moment in your career that has made a significant impact to you?
I think I've had several pivots. None of them have been kind of groundbreakingly big. I mean, I spent 14 years working for IBM, so that in itself probably plays to my low risk point, right? But I've done different things, and I'm really kind of proud of the range I built up, of the breadth in what I do. It also causes me problems, when I have interviews, I can't work out what I'm a specialist in.
Sure.
But for me, I think probably the biggest pivot was when or at least the most important pivot was when I took on my first job in the world of blockchain, which was 2016, 17, something like that. I'd been working in just kind of traditional bits of IBM, in the big machine that is their technology services kind of division and business, and doing sales jobs. I've done a chief of staff job. And then the opportunity presented itself to start the UK blockchain mission, if you like. No one really knew what it was as a technology, what it would mean to customers, what it would represent in terms of a business to IBM. And for me, that was it was a total change in scene. I went from selling things that were traditional, doing traditional, day-to-day activities, to all of a sudden I kind of had this very broad scope that no one really understood. I had to start a business, build a team, find some customers, get my head around a technology, get my head around a product and a kind of a market, I guess. And I just learned so much, and I ended up doing it for 1 year in England and then 3 years in Australia. And whilst those 4 years were still very much within IBM, I was in a bubble. I was really starting something. I was part of growing something. My job was grow this thing, develop it. And I learned lots. Of course, it still involved some selling. It still involved some kind of technology delivery, some things that I'd done before, I guess. But it also involved quirky joint ventures with customers, talking to people outside the technology departments, and being at the bleeding edge of tech, explaining to people what blockchain was. All my friends thought it was wonderfully funky and cool. I didn't really know what I was doing most of the time, but it was like the seriously sharp end of learning, and it was mega exciting, and it kind of taught me the value of becoming an expert in something, perhaps for the first time. And I've probably gone back the other way for what it's worth. I still think of myself as pretty broad, but that was the first time I really went deep, and I like that. I did fun things. I sort of did interviews with newspapers and on Sky, and things that momentarily made me feel boosted my ego.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
It hasn't lasted, by the way.
Yeah, no, certainly.
It was really interesting.
I suppose traditionally with the outside view of IBM, going from something that's probably fairly structured, that's been rinsed and repeated and works, to going to have to figure out what is essentially a grey area. And having that ambiguity is something which I think for a lot of people like yourself that have been there, done it, got their stripes, it's a good chance to throw yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit. I can understand why it was definitely appealing to want to kind of dive into that, as you said, and have a bit of a specialism, but at the same time it's probably made your other areas much stronger as well for the knowledge you picked up there. How do you approach challenges and setbacks in your professional life, and what's your go-to strategy to overcoming them?
Yeah, good one. I mean, I don't have a go-to strategy. I should declare that up front. It's tough, and you ask about professional life, but I suppose I think I mentioned it earlier, but I very much one of my values. I stole this concept from Brené Brown. One of my values is balance. In that I sort of like to really remain nice and balanced, and I think I apply that in professional and personal life in parallel. And one has loads of different challenges and tricky situations, personal conflicts kind of in the workplace, moments where you wonder what on earth you're doing, where if your career is even a career and is it going anywhere, should you stop what you're doing and go and become a doctor, do something actually a little bit more meaningful. I think I suppose the mentality and the perspective is probably my first thing. Actually, to the strategy, one thing I would always do when I face a sticky situation is I'd try and take a breath and kind of step back. I'm not quite as effective as some people at actually going for a walk, that sort of thing. But I bounce something off someone I trust, or someone that knows the situation. Get a bit of an outside-in view. Take a moment to work out like what's going on here. Does it matter? And I think that's probably the perspective point there. You need perspective about time. Life is much longer than just a couple of weeks. You lose a deal, you bounce back. You lose a job, you bounce back. All sorts of things. You have an argument with someone or a tough meeting, you bounce back, generally speaking, and you've got plenty of time to do so. So I think, you got to take the losses as well as look forward to the wins. And so, when something happens to me, I tend to go, okay, right, what do I need to, digest it? What do I need to do? Get some outside perspective. And really, I can't remember what film it was, but the kind of concept of taking a breath, take a beat before you react, I think is just so valuable, because usually when you get that perspective back, you realize that it doesn't matter too much and that you can, remain pretty calm.
Yeah, it's quite easy to act on impulse, isn't it?
It's very easy to act on impulse if you let yourself, but you'll end up with a red card and in a super cab.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely some good advice, and I think it's something which is quite easy to practice as well, and ultimately will almost always mean that you're guiding yourself with more informed decisions, which in the end goal is always going to be better. So yeah, definitely great to hear. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights. It's been great to hear, and really appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Chris. Cheers.